Morning, everybody. Hi, my name is Gary, and I'm from Singapore. It's a different kind of presentation. I think we saw a lot of technology, and I'm not a tech guy. Well, I'm just going to tell you a little bit of a story about myself. I wasn't a produce guy either. I was actually a finance guy for 15 years. I was a VC, became a banker, stockbroker, and I set up my own private equity. And during the time of private equity, I invested in a company. And it was one of those moments in life where I call it my Titanic moment. It was one of the worst deals I ever got in. And it was in a company that was 1 week before it was going to go bankrupt. And it was a company that was actually in China. I took over a company that had 1,900 hectares of plantations. It had 40,000 metric tons of co-room. And we were selling to 22,000 points of sales. Now, the first part of that 1,900 hectares, it was primarily Fuji apples out of Shantung in China. Everybody says, like, it should be fun, right? You go to the farm, and I stood right up there, and as a banker, standing out there, and I said, whatever you could see out there, everything belongs to you. And at that point, I was going to cry. Now, when I went to the packing house, it was so large, I call it the Forbidden City. So this is my background, and I came into the produce business, and I know nothing about it, but I took over a business that I had to then turn it around quickly. It was a lot of money went in. It was a company that was in debt, and we had a huge problem. So what we did, we took over the farm, and after a while, we realized it's not going to work. So we gave the farm back to the farmers, and we returned the assets to the bank, and we capped the 22,000 point of sales. And what we did, the brand of the company was called Sun Moon. We basically became the Dole of Asia. And essentially, instead of just selling Fuji apples to the region, we started to sell everything else from all parts of the world. And that's sort of like the transformation of the company that I've done. And instead of just using pen and paper and Excel spreadsheet, what we did is we actually then invested in a great Oracle ERP system. And we started to be a little bit more digital, and I thought I was Captain Kirk in the Enterprise. I could see everything, and it was great. I actually worked quite well for the next 3 years, seeing all that numbers of seeing all my containers. We moved thousands of containers of apples, oranges, avocados, citrus, stone fruits from all over the world. And it goes to all the markets in Southeast Asia, including China, Japan, and Korea, and the Middle East. So that was my moment that I thought, okay, I've got that company from the brink of bankruptcy to where it is, got in the ERP system, put in all the tech, and next thing I got was to get the Alibaba group to come in, and they became one of the biggest investors in our group. So now I said, I can hand it over to the group to basically run the next part of it. And that's sort of like the background that I came from. What wasn't happy about it was, how many of you do global trade, or how many do international trade? Can I have just a show of hands, please? Okay, that means a couple of people are doing global trade. And one of the reasons why not many wants to go into the export market is, and I understand the problem is, it's very difficult to actually trust because it's a nightmare. The minute we get out of all the good things we do here in Australia. It's fantastic, all the wonderful stuff that you guys are doing. The minute it gets onto the ship and the minute it gets to the other side, the whole world changes. And I call this the messy middle. This messy middle needs to change, and it has to change in a manner that I wanted to solve the problem. And it, again, came from a little idea that my daughter asked me, how do I know the apple that I'm selling is mine? Now, we heard a lot of technology. We use AI, we can use VR, we can use a lot of stuff. But I think what my wife says to me, I guess, is the best thing she says, show me the money, right? You can invest in all the technology, but you got to basically make it work. So what I'm going to do is just say why I think we have this demystify global trade is because we think we can find a solution that is a little bit more practical, and it shows me the money at the end of the day. I think we all know this. The biggest problem about trade is that we always get into dispute. we actually get a situation where the apples that we sell or the apples that we pack, and when it arrives, somebody tells us that our apples has a problem. And what happens in my group, I will have my sales team come up to me. They will tell me that there are issues. And my finance team will tell me the invoice that I was supposed to be collecting isn't collecting because there were certain claims. And then we go back to the packers and we go back to the growers. And then this thing goes on for quite a bit. And by the time we get resolved, it's usually 5 to 10% of our bottom line being affected. All right, so this is kind of like where the pain points are for me. Next, it takes a lot of, or definitely affects my margin, the time spent on dispute, the claims itself, and the manpower. So imagine I have to talk to the finance team, I talk to my salesperson, I get to the shipping documents, and it all works in a manner where I think GS1 mentioned it earlier, which basically you have a barcode that doesn't actually links it back to the documentation when you go for export. So you can see the badge, but you can't see the documentation. So this is where we are. So what we then did is say, okay, we all know it costs a lot of problems. It costs billions of dollars. It costs about 40 billion for us actually going out into this whole industry. So what we are saying is that I think closer to home is something I think you guys are very familiar with. It's the strawberry incident. Now, it happened to us as well in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, when some of the strawberries were just basically taken off from the shelf and everything was just basically thrown away. We had the same issues when we had rock melons. The Australian government cleared everything. We went into Malaysia. When we went into Malaysia, Malaysian government did not accept any of that clearance that we got, and everything was thrown away. Now, this is the reality for us when we do global trade, and it's such a pain in the ass for all of us, right? So this is some of the ways that we thought that, okay, let's see where we go from here. DiMuto came about because I thought, I get everybody coming into my office a lot of time telling me what IBM is doing, what PwC is doing, KPMG is doing, what Walmart is doing. Now, I call them the empire, and I'm just trying to be like Star Wars here. I'm going to be maybe not Luke Skywalker, but maybe Obi-Wan Kenobi, trying to get the force behind it, right? Because we're the smaller guys compared to all the big guys telling us what they want us to do, and we are selling to everyone. And if you can imagine, I'm selling to the Walmarts and the Costcos and the Targets and the Woolies of the world, and every one of them are trying to come up with their own different systems. And then when you give a call to IBM, and I say, IBM, I want to go on to the food trust. And they say, what is your product? I said, I'm selling coconuts to Walmart from Thailand. And they say, okay, why don't you tell us which factory? We'll send a consultant over, and we'll tell you how to get your coconut onto the food trust. And then I say, how much would that cost? Well, it came out to be quite a bit just to get a consultant to tell me how to pack my coconut to get onto the food trust on the blockchain. So this is where that moment of frustration and everything that I thought, okay, I got to solve my own problem. And this is where we have. DiMuto actually means digital butter. It goes back to basics economics of, we always want to exchange our cows to our sheep, but we don't trust one another, therefore we actually have to have a marketplace. And when you bring your cows and your sheep together, you then exchange because you trust what you see. And then eventually you created currencies to exchange because you don't want to buy the whole cow or you don't want to buy the whole sheep. So if you use the basic economics and everything, digital butter is what we really have to go back. Go back to the root of trade. The root of trade is trust. So to trust is basically to be able to then say, let's create something by the trade for the trade. So people of us in the trade literally wants this, right? We have many, many, many pain points. So every day of the work, I just go to work and this is what I do. Everybody tells me that there's a problem with an avocado, a problem with an apple, and it's coming from different parts of the world. So where I think this is where we're going to make the difference is that the aim is transforming the global landscape because we think we need to solve the 4T. And what's the 4T? The 4T stands for trace, track, transparent, to build trust. So we have to go to the very basics of all the wonderful things that is going. If you notice what's going on at the farm level, there's lots of technology. Satellite pictures, you got derma, you got imaging, you got VR, and then you go on to AI at the level of the retailers, right? You saw what Black AI is talking about. But where the messy middle is people in the pack house and where it was received, that part sort of like who he's talking about. And when someone talks about the blockchain, I think the easiest way was someone from Hong Kong speaking to me in Cantonese, telling me what blockchain is. So the simple example and the layman's way of saying, he says, John and I goes for lunch all the time, and John keeps a Excel spreadsheet telling him who bought lunch. Guess what? Gary keeps an Excel spreadsheet, and I keep who buys lunch too. Next week, we're going to have lunch. John says, Gary, according to my Excel spreadsheet, you're buying lunch. And I go, no, John, according to my Excel spreadsheet, you're buying lunch. So this is where the ERP or the Excel spreadsheet of all that systems that we have at our office is not going to help us, because whose Excel spreadsheet are we going to trust? So what we did is, think of it, the blockchain literally is a couple of us who keeps that transaction, and we all just have to go back to that transaction, and we know who bought lunch. And that data is immutable. You can't change it. It's just almost like a timestamp. You just timestamp it, you put it up there. So now imagine that if you could put every picture of every fruit, of every box, of every documentation, the certificate of health, phyto certification that was required, that was needed by regulation, has already been put up. And essentially available to everybody on the cloud for that transaction itself. So I don't have to go to your ERP to see everything that you have done, and you don't have to come into my ERP to see what I have done. So this is kind of like the basic background of what we have done. So to do this, we think we need to close the loop. And I always use, I like to use the word closing the loop, because that's sort of like it. But closing the loop doesn't mean a linear picture of getting the growers to the retailers. Really closing the loops means being able to speak to the consumer. Today, as a brand, I wasn't even able to talk to the consumer, because the minute it gets to the retailers, it disappears. I don't really know where the fruit goes. I do not know where they sell. And the retailers aren't always helpful in letting us know who the customers are. In fact, they don't really know where the customers are themselves. So closing the loops means to be able to take the apple and the avocado, to be able to scan it, and then to be able to do the Uber style of giving me a 5-star rating or not, right? And then feedback it. And then what we did in Indonesia, and what we did in Thailand, is to basically do a lucky draw and then be able to participate in that lucky draw, so that you can actually tell us where do you buy it, who do you buy it from, and then give us a feedback. And then what we're doing is getting a lucky draw. With the Western Australian, we're coming out with a lucky draw that you can actually win a trip to go down to Perth, and then actually go down to Manjipark to see the farm and actually see the pack house itself. So this is some of the things that we thought was really new and engaging in the way we can actually get the consumers. So how do we do it? Well, again, we talk about the 2D and 1D. The barcode literally allows you to take numeric numbers, so it gets it in batch. But the 2D allows you to do alphanumeric, which means it allows you to take the data of numeric numbers and as well as the documentation. So one digital code that allows you to actually put this. Well, that's great for what GS1 can do, and that's what we're working with as well. But the other part you're going to have a problem is, how do you then capture the data? So I call that little middle equipment at the back. We created it. It's actually called DACI. It's Digital Asset Creation. It literally takes a picture and it scans. And then it goes onto our platform, which is basically cloud-based, and it's, again, blockchain. Now, I think a lot of people talk about blockchain in a manner where I get a lot of different ways of blockchain, because blockchain is Bitcoin, and everybody talks about the different protocols of blockchain. What we did is saying, look, we want to be agnostic about what kind of blockchain you use. So what we have done is very specific to say that we can connect it via the applications. So what we did is we actually allow different systems to actually communicate on the platform, because we can't afford to change the system as you evolve. We have to be able to see the data live as and when we need it. So what are the benefits? It keeps tracks in large number. It's easy to verify what we see. It proves the error. And I think one of the biggest problems when I speak to people in the blockchain space is that, when they talk about smart contract and they talk about how blockchain can error-proof the trade, well, I think we took a different approach. One of the biggest problems in global trade is that we could never prove the error. We didn't know who in which part of the chain made that mistake. And that was the fundamental basis of what we were trying to prove. It's not that we wanted to basically error-proof it, because you're going to go into a chain where it goes on to the other side, that it's a little bit more complicated when it's on the other side. So the receiver now has to basically take the same system, take the picture, tells me which box did you take that actually has the problem. So that's sort of like where we have actually worked into it. Next, this is what we've done this is in Mexico. We've done it on the avocado lines. So this is where a DACI system. We've done the same machines for some of the practicality as well. But more importantly, I think for the people in the room, when we talk about global trade, the biggest fear we have is, besides knowing what is the problem, the next problem we have is that we got to approach it from a 360 point of view. What we mean by that is, after you get the data, after you know what you still need to solve the other problem, and that is trade financing. Are you going to get paid? Right? So one of the biggest problems is all the work that we do, if we don't get paid, you're not going to get it. Right? And this is where, with the data that we have, we've actually started to actually help our receivers as well as our farmers to basically get the financing in place so that they get the cash flow that they need. We put our global trade network together so that we actually now not only tag your fruits, but we actually assist you in actually finding the right markets to get the products into that market as well, so that you get the money as well as get access to new markets. Thirdly, we actually allow you to basically communicate with the market consumers so that they understand a lot of the good stuff. Let me say, for example, we sell carrots, and I sell Australian carrots and I sell Chinese carrots. And it's so difficult to sell carrots when you look at the price perspective. Australian carrots are way, way more expensive. But they taste so much better, because the truth of the matter, the Chinese carrots don't taste like anything. So it's just carrots. They look like carrots, but they don't taste like carrots. So these are the kind of things that we hope that we could actually share that difference so that we can then get that premium that we need, because the work that the Australians have done and the New Zealanders have done is fantastic. But we can't make that difference known. And this is sort of like the way we wanted to make sure that the platform could actually help. And of course, data is going to be the king. So with all the data that we have, we wanted to make sure that we can share this with the right group so that we can actually grow. Hold that power to ourselves. I'm going to give you, have anybody seen this before? You know what this is? A durian? It's the stinkiest fruit, right, on earth. Well, but to the Chinese, it's like the best smelling fruit on earth. And this is from Thailand. So we blockchained the first durian, because the biggest problem about durian, it came from a tree, and it takes a very short time before it ripes. And when it ripes, it literally cracks. And basically the fruit rots and the smell gets worse, right? If you think it's bad, it gets a lot worse, okay? So what we've done is that we basically did a blockchain system where we worked with the largest exporter of, this is only one of our pack houses. This is as rudimentary as you could get. It literally is a shed, right? But what we have done is that we have basically, and look at the value, it's not very cheap. One durian on a container builds up to about $110,000. And if you have a claim, and it's about 10%, that's a lot about what we're doing. So we've got this. The lady on the left, she's not a supermodel. She's actually the owner of the shed. She has 14 of them. I call her the queen of Thailand. She blockchained this together with us in a DiMuto system. And in the middle, literally, it gives you a system that sees what the packing list, what the whole timeline, and this durian was actually sent to Japan. So now you can actually be able to see each durian, know where it was packed, and which box it came from which container. So fundamentally, for those people in the trade, we will understand that it's actually a purchase order to the containers, to the carton, to the fruits.
What we have done is also for her frozen durians. It's one of the other ways of actually packing durians. It's actually putting it, this looks like a wafer fab factory, but this is actually her frozen factory. So this is where she does her frozen durians, her mangoes, mangosteens, and this is going to the global world that we're actually selling it to further. And you can see the tagging that goes along. Now, this is in Jakarta. This is in Indonesia. So what happens is I got a call, and this is one of my customers, right? We sell Fuji apples, and I got a call. The call came from one of the owners. He said, hey, Gary, we got a Fuji apple that you sold that has spots on it. And I go, okay. Now, in the past, this would have been the biggest nightmare because I have no clue. First of all, is it my apple or which apple is this, right? So what happened was I said, okay, this is the apple that was sent to me by WhatsApp, a picture of an apple with spots, it's a fruit virus. Then I take a picture of that box that you say it is. Tell me which number it is, because you can scan it, and they did, right? And then all we did was I was able to immediately see which was packed, when it was packed, how it was packed at the local distributor. And it fundamentally was one word I said to him was, you didn't put it in the cold room. So the local guy didn't put it in his cold room, and he left it on the floor. And all I did was just say that, and I was able to see that information immediately, and the claim disappeared. So that was it. I couldn't, you know, in the past, this would have been a nightmare because I would have called my salesperson, I would call my shipping department, but I did this on my own system, and I was able to talk. As the chairman of my own company, I was kind of pleased with myself, right? I was able to get that information and actually solve the problem without even getting to that point. So this is sort of the applications that we have done. Where we have done it, these are some of the trials that we have done. The US, Mexico, and in Western Australia, the first trial will be coming out in a couple of months. We're doing it with the avocado guys. They will be putting up the whole system in their factories. And then this is basically what we're going to basically be working on. So we actually think this approach works because one of the most important things is that the data has to be at the growers and at the packers so that we can all do a better job right at the start. If we get all the information at the end, and the end of the information isn't very clear, we can't put that two pieces together from the front to the back. So where we thought it was start from the point where the growers help them, and do it economically, because we're not selling you any machines, and we're not selling you any system that's going to cost a lot. In fact, the equipment that we have is also on loan so that you can actually put the data onto it. So what you're paying is, it won't cost probably $100 a container to get that kind of information that you need. And what we have done is to work with Google to put machine learning and AI so that for that box of orange or apples or avocados or fruits, we are now able to use machine learning and AI to actually see whether the size of the apples, the blemishes on the apples, and the quality of the apples going out. And what we have even done is to be able to work with Google to geotag the durian tree to see how many durians is on that tree, and then geotag it to the geomap so that we actually know what kind of productions we're expecting from that farm that we're working or contracting with. So this is just a background. This is what we do, and this is the information. If you need to get to me, my name is Gary. It's gary@dimuto.io. So just drop me a note if you are interested. What we hope to do is to have more collaborative partners who can see different ways of doing it. And I hope to be able to help bring a lot of the good stuff that Australia is doing out to the rest of the world. I think Australia, New Zealand, it's really a wonderful place for that 600 million mouths in the Southeast Asian market, very complex market, and of course the Chinese market. There's a great opportunity now, but it all goes back to the basics. We need to make sure that we know what we're tagging, tracing. It must be transparent so that we can have trust. Thank you very much.